went, wow, we've got a lot of extra fat rolling around and nobody to store. So let's make some more fat cells. And so all of a sudden on your hips and thighs and around your middle, they're all back again. And so if you do get liposuction, you got to watch your diet, because once the levels of fats go back up, then the body goes, let's store some fat. That's just that's a kind of like a survival mechanism for your body. Your body has forgotten that you're not a hunter and gatherer anymore, and that you don't go for several days without eating food. And if you want to fish, you do not take your spear down into the river and have to spend 2.5 days trying to spear a fish before you get one. And then you cook it, and you might not eat again for another day until you spear another fish. It doesn't understand that you go to Fred Meyer with your spear to the frozen beef section. Pound your chest, throw up the cart, and so it doesn't realize that you really have an excess of calories most of the time. So it tries to store whenever possible. This guy is called mesenchymal or embryonic connective tissue. And when we take a look at this guy, what we see here are some cells that are very, very, very generic. And so we refer them to as stem cells. The role of a stem cell, and most of you heard about stem cells on television. And so stem cells are not bad guys. Okay? They're really important to us. And so somehow we get this idea, stem cells are evil because we do research. No, stem cells are good. What stem cells are guys that are very generic, and then they divide, and then they have the ability to specialize. And so in your blood, for example, in your bone marrow is where we produce the blood cells. You've got these stem cells, and they're just sitting there, and they get the signal to divide, and they divide. And as they divide, depending on what other signals are present, they'll become red blood cells, or white blood cells, or platelets. And if I become a white blood cell, I have some other signals that will tell me what kind of white blood cell to become. And so these are super, super, super generic kind of guys that can become all kinds of other cells depending on the signal that you give them and where they're located. Make sense? So the stem cells that were in our connective tissue that turned into adipocytes, the signal was excess lipids, triglycerides floating around in our bloodstream for an extended period of time. And that's told them to make more fat cells. So with these guys, the reason that mesenchymal tissue is often called embryonic tissue is that's basically where we find it. We find it in embryos, and we find it in developing fetuses. By the time you're an adult, basically the mesenchymal tissue as a large tissue has disappeared. But what it left behind in different places in your body are stem cells who are really like these guys in that they're not specialized, and as they divide and produce more cells, those cells can then specialize. So in your skin, so remember you're going to read chapter 5 this weekend. In your skin, the epidermis, that bottom layer, is made up of stem cells, and they divide and become keratinocytes, and the keratinocytes is what makes up your skin. Are we okay? All right. So just take a look at stem cells. What they're showing you here is there's a mesenchymal cell and all the different cells that you can actually get from this way. In this one, we're going to take a look at this actually when we do the bone in a little more detail. But these are all mesenchymal cells, and what they do is they begin to divide, and when they divide, they specialize, and they become osteoblasts. And the osteoblasts are these cells that are trapped here. And these are all building bone. And in this case, what they're building is your nasal mucosa. So like the nasal septum right up here, there's this big plate of bone that's there. It's growing, they're building the bone that's there, and the bone that makes up the part of the nasal cavities where your maxilla are, and all of that. It's creating all that bone that's there. And once again, kind of a similar thing. We start out with our stem cell, and we go through several stages, and end up with all these different kinds of cells that we see here through the signal system. So this guy right here is a mast cell. For some of you, in about 2 months, these guys are going to be your worst enemy. because things are, we hope in 2 months, February, March, yeah. We hope in March things start to get a little warmer and greener, and pollen gets produced and stuff, and so mast cells are going to release chemicals like histamine, and histamine is what causes you to have the watery eyes, bloody nose, and the congestion, and you have allergies and hay fever and stuff like that. And so he's an important player in that the chemicals that he releases activates the rest of the immune system and gets it going, and so that we can come in and fight off these invaders. And when you have allergies, it's just you're reacting to something you shouldn't react to because you have an overactive immune system. And so if he releases histamines, what do we take? Antihistamines, because they bind these molecules and don't let them do what they're supposed to do, so the itching and the watery eyes and the congestion disappears. And this is the lymphocyte right here. And a lymphocyte is an important guy in your immune system. If you get the H3N2 virus over the next few months, flu, this guy will help come in and get rid of the flu. He will, there's 2 kinds of these guys, B cell and C cell lymphocytes. And one of them will produce antibodies to help you, and the other one will die and kill stuff all by itself. And this is a macrophage, and so when you take a look at these guys, this is once again just a kind of white blood cell, and so I can start to see faces, and you're seeing these pictures. All you have to remember is they're white blood cells, and they're important for your defense. But when you read about them, I just want you to kind of have a picture of what they're doing. That's why I have all these pictures here. And so these guys are like macrophages, only smaller, so they're called macrophages. They do phagocytosis. But also, these guys, when they're actually stimulated, can sometimes release chemicals that will also help to kill pathogens. So what they do is they have the ability to move through our body. So this is the blood cell. They squeeze out of the blood cells, they get out into our tissues, and they roam through our tissues looking for the bad guys and trying to kill them off. And so if you get the flu, that's the H3N2 virus that's out right now that's so bad. If you get the flu, these guys are going to migrate through your respiratory system, trying to help you out, kill all these guys off. So these are the connective tissue fibers. So we have 3 kinds, right? Elastic fibers, collagen, reticular. Which one's the most dominant fiber in your body? Collagen. By far the most dominant protein in your entire body. It's made of a bunch of subunits that make strands, and then the strands get all wound together. So think about a rope with all the strands that make up a rope, or better yet, think about some of those really big steel cables with all the thinner strands that make up the steel cable. Because if you have collagen and you have steel, pound for pound, collagen, if it's hanging from the end, is actually stronger than the steel. Collagen's tough stuff. And so elastic fibers are really sort of similar to collagen. It's just the little strands that make up the fiber are not as thick, and there's not as many of them. So these elastic fibers are pretty strong, because there's fewer fibers, they're also more stretchy. And so the thicker we get, the less stretchy we are. And so when we take a look at these guys under a microscope, color is never a good thing unless we tell you when you look at the microscope, don't rely on color. So when we look at these guys under a microscope, collagen fibers are always going to be thicker fibers, and then the elastic fibers are always going to be thinner fibers. And what we can say, getting away from color, is typically elastic fibers hold stains better than collagen does, so it has a tendency to stain a little darker. And that's kind of what you see up here too. So here's the big fat collagen fiber right here, and there's a little skinny elastic fiber that's going down right through there. And then you can see the little fibroblasts over here. And just so we can, I'm sure Jen probably told you, but if there's a cell that we want you to identify, we'll tell you and specifically show it to you. But when you take a look at all of these tissues like this one, there's no way that we would expect you to identify a fibroblast from a macrophage or something like that. That's just not where you're at yet. So don't worry about that in the areolar tissue. These guys are reticular fibers. Reticular fibers are very, very similar to collagen also, except they're very, very short fibers, but they have a tendency to be a little bit thick. When we see reticular fibers, that's all these guys that you see right here, they have a tendency to kind of go in multiple different directions, and they have a tendency to kind of make meshworks. And so we have all these cells that get trapped in that we call the parenchyma. And so when we see this particular tissue, what it quite often is associated with is some kind of organ that quite often gets to change its shape a little bit, or it's an organ that has the role of filtering. It has some kind of job of filtering stuff out. So your liver and your spleen and your lymph nodes are dominated by reticular fibers because they're all filtering kinds of organs. And they work real hard and they get pressure sometimes from the outside and they sort of change shape. They also all fill up with fluids, and so that allows them to kind of expand and contract and change shape as the fluid moves in and out also. So that's kind of the big role of the reticular fiber that's there. Make sense? Okay. When we take a look at collagen fibers, since they're so good at holding on, or resisting force, not being broken from end to end, we have a tendency to see those guys lined up and next to each other. They don't do very good if they're all lined up in one direction, in the sideways direction. So they would be really good, like to have heavy weight on there, really good at holding on that way. But if you whacked it from the side, it would have a tendency to bend and tear. And so it would have a tendency to transfer force in whatever direction the fibers are running. So if they're all running in one direction, they transfer forces in one direction. If we run them in different directions, then we can transfer force in different directions because they're running in different directions. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So this is our areolar tissue. So we're back to the loose tissue, back to the original slide. Areolar tissue is dominated by collagen fibers and elastic fibers. So these red guys are collagen, these little dark guys are elastic fibers. Areolar tissue is found all over through your body. So it's one of our really predominant connective tissues. And one of the things that we noticed about this particular tissue is its ground substance is really viscous. And so that means if you surround organs and things with it, you make it the packaging material in your body, and it's just underneath your skin, if you get some kind of invasion, like somebody pokes you with a rusty nail that goes into the skin, and you transfer some bacteria in there, those bacteria are going to have a hard time migrating out of that area because of this viscous fluid that's there. It gives our immune system a chance to get there and help protect us. The other thing is because it has so much ground substance that's here, it is a wonderful place to store electrolytes and things like that that would be dissolved in water. So it becomes a wonderful storage area for your body in terms of these molecules we want stored in our body fluid. And then when we take a look at the cells that are present here, you'll have fibroblasts, obviously, to make the fiber cells. He's quite often associated with fat because he's a packaging cushioning material, and fat is cushioning kind of material, also a packaging material. We typically are going to see also associated with this guy immune cells that will be present, mast cells and macrophages and things like that, because those cells have the ability to migrate, so they can migrate through these tissues really well and get to where the pathogens are if we need to protect you. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you take a look at your skin has this outer layer called the epidermis, and it has a layer just underneath it that's called the dermis, which has some areolar tissue in it, along with some dense and regular connective tissue. Underneath that, we have the next layer, which is called the hypodermis, which is areolar and fat together. And when we give you a shot, quite often in the hypodermis, and we give it to you with a hypodermic needle, which is where it got its name. And so that's really kind of a good way to give somebody a shot for things to spread around, because it's highly vascularized and it's got a lot of fluid. And once it gets to the fluid, medicine starts to spread, goes into the blood vessels, it's out to the rest of the body. Make sense? Okay. All right, this is dense regular connective tissue. And so when we take a look at this guy, it says dense, so we expect fibers to be tight together. Good. Regular means they run in the same direction. And that's what the name is telling. So when you take a look at dense regular connective tissue, most of the time when we see these guys, we're talking about things like tendons and ligaments. Also, we have a structure called an aponeurosis. And an aponeurosis is a tendon that's really, really broad. So tendons attach muscle to bone. Ligaments attach bone to bone. Aponeurosis, when we think of tendons and ligaments, we have a tendency to think like this, sort of long, ropey-looking structures. Think of an aponeurosis as like a broad sheet of paper. And so this aponeurosis that you have in your skull, this bone, this muscle right here is called the frontalis, and this one back here is called the occipitalis. And we have a big tendon that goes from here across the top of your skull all the way to the back, connects those two together. And so since it's a big, broad sheet, it's called an aponeurosis, but it's also just dense, regular connective tissue. You have a big one right here, too, where your abdominal muscles are. And actually really broad in your back, too. Are you with me? Is it okay? Questions so far? Okay. I'm trying to read faces. I've got a lot of this. Just really kind of asshole. Make sense? Okay, so it's dysregular for its function. Its function will be a transfer of force. So this is our triceps muscle. This is the tendon that's connecting it to the brachium down here, your electron area. And so what happens is, if you have you got up in the morning, you have to crunch, you brought it up to here, then you go, it's Captain Crunch. You have to eat this really quick, or it gets soggy, and it's called Captain Soggy. So you have to back down as quick as possible, right? So this muscle is going to contract, your triceps, it pulls on that tendon, and the tendon's attached to your arm like this. So it's transferring the force that's generated by the muscle in a particular direction to an attachment point, and that helps our bones move at the joint. Does that make sense? Okay. So once again, though, it's transferring force in one direction. Is it going to transfer force very good this direction?
No.
No. So if I have ligaments right here in my leg, and these ligaments are trying to help these two bones stay close to each other and stabilize the knee, right? They do good this way, but if your quarterback in the NFL, the 320-pound lineman comes in and hits your leg this way, do they resist the force this way? Nah, it goes, bends over, and things tear all over the place. Okay. So this is dense, irregular connective tissue. So if irregular, what would that mean?
All over.
Fibers going all over the place. Okay? So let me have your arm. If you sit in the front, you'll be volunteering all year long. So I'm going to take and rip her skin off of her arm. Did it come off? Well, it's moved in a lot of different directions. How come? Dense irregular connective tissue. What happens is this tissue right here is called the dermis. Fibers are running all over the place. So no matter what you do to your body, you go out on Friday night, because it's a 3-day weekend, and we can put off reading chapter 5 until Monday, because it's still Monday. And you go out and you do the funky monkey and all that gyrations that you do, and you don't have to worry about your skin not keeping up with you because of holding on or being in place because of dense, irregular connective tissue. Spreads it in multiple directions. Okay, see you guys next week.